Okay, reflex as the basis of nervous system, spinal reflexes, segmented levels of their closure, and topical diagnostic significance. Reflex. Of the many kinds of neural activity, there is one simple kind in which a stimulus leads to an immediate action. This is reflex activity. The term is now used to describe an action that is an inborn central nervous system activity, not involving consciousness, in which a particular stimulus, by exciting an afferent nerve, produces a stereotyped immediate response of a muscle or gland. Types of human reflexes. Myotatic reflexes or muscle stretch reflexes, sometimes known as deep tendon reflexes, provide information on the integrity of the CNS and the peripheral nervous system. Generally, decreased reflexes indicate a peripheral problem, and lively or exaggerated reflexes a central one. A stretch reflex is the contraction of a muscle in response to its lengthwise stretch, such as biceps reflex C5 C6, brachioradialis reflex C5 C6 and C7, extensor digitorum reflex C6 and C7, triceps reflex C6, C7 and C8, and so on. Other reflexes found in the central nervous system include abdominal reflexes, gastrocolic reflexes, baroreflex, and cuff reflex. Spinal reflexes include the stretch reflex, the Golgi tendon reflex, the crossed extensor reflex, and the withdrawal reflex. The stretch reflex is a monosynaptic reflex that regulates the muscle length through neuronal stimulation at the muscle spindle. The alpha motor neurons resist stretching by causing contraction, and the gamma motor neurons control the sensitivity of the reflex. The stretch and Golgi tendon reflexes work in tandem to control muscle length and tension. Both are examples of ipsilateral reflexes, meaning the reflex occurs on the same side of the body as the stimulus. The crossed extensor reflex is a contralateral reflex that allows the body to compensate on one side for a stimulus or on the other. For example, when one foot steps on a nail, the crossed extensor reflex shifts the body weight onto the other foot, protecting and withdrawing the foot on the nail. The withdrawal reflex and the more specific pain withdrawal reflex involve withdrawal in response to a stimulus or pain. When pain receptors called nociceptors are stimulated, reciprocal innervations stimulate the flexors to withdraw and inhibit the extensors to ensure they are unable to prevent flexion and withdrawal. This is the stretch reflex. So we can see the cell body of the sensory neuron, how the afferent impulses from stretch receptor to the spinal cord, and how the afferent impulses causes contraction of the stretch muscle, and how the efferent impulses inhibit the contraction of the antagonistic muscles. So here we have Golgi tendon reflex, the extensor muscle, and the flexor muscles. So here the afferent fiber uh, from Golgi tendon organ goes to the extensor, and we have afferent fiber to muscle associated with stretch tendon, afferent fiber to the antagonistic muscle. So here we have crossed extensor reflex. It occurs simultaneously coordinated with flexor reflex. Uh, Example, flexor reflex causes leg to pull up, Crossed extensor reflex straightens other leg to receive body weight and maintained by reverberating circuits. Flexor or withdrawal reflex. So we have cutaneous afferent fiber from nociceptor. Uh, Nociceptor stimulated due to mechanical or temperature threat. So as soon as we feel the temperature, the leg stimulates and flexes to withdraw the reflex, and opposite leg extends to support. Next, motor and reflex effects of spinal cord dysfunction by segmental level. So here is the location of lesion and the possible effects. At or above C5, respiratory paralysis, quadriplegia. Between C5 and C6, paralysis of legs, wrist and hands, weakness of shoulder abduction and elbow flexion, loss of biceps jerk reflex, loss of brachioradialis, deep tendon reflex. Between C6 and C7, paralysis of legs, wrist and hands, but shoulder movement and elbow flexion usually possible. Between C7 and C8, loss of triceps jerk reflex, paralysis of trunk, legs, and hands. Between C8 to T1, Horner syndrome, constricted pupil, facial anhidrosis, and paralysis of legs. Ciliospinal reflex and clinical significance. Ciliospinal reflex is characterized by rapid dilation of the ipsilateral pupil with a painful or startling stimulus. Pathway of sympathetic innervation of the pupil. The sympathetic efferent pathway has three neurons and is ipsilateral. The first order, the central neuron, arises from the posterior hypothalamus and descends through the brainstem on the same site close to the trigeminal nucleus. It descends dorsally to the red nucleus and lies at the lateral segment of the midbrain, pons and medulla. It synapses at the ciliospinal center of the budge, located at C8 to T2 in the intermediolateral horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. The second order preganglionic neuron originates from the ciliospinal center and goes to the superior cervical ganglion in the neck. It exits the spinal cord through the dorsal-spinal root and enters the paravertebral sympathetic chain. The second order neuron passes near the apex of the lung and may suffer damage in surgeries of the neck or bronchogenic carcinoma, causing Horner syndrome. Uh, the third order postganglionic neuron passes on the surface of the internal carotid artery and joins the ophthalmic nerve at the cavernous sinus. The sympathetic postganglionic fibers pass through the nasociliary nerve and long ciliary nerve and reach the ciliary body and the dilator pupillae muscles, which are radial muscles of the iris. Uh, okay,